A man buys a wrecked Bugatti Chiron for a fraction of its original price. He spends months rebuilding it with his own hands. Then the company that built it tries to stop him from ever driving it again. Bugatti has now refused him twice. And this time, regulators across Europe are paying attention. What started as a passion project has become a battle over who truly owns a car after it leaves the factory. The answer may change automotive history. In the world of hypercars, few names carry as much weight as Bugatti. The Bugatti Chiron is not just a car. It is a statement. A piece of hand-built engineering that costs more than most people will earn in a lifetime. The base price of a new Chiron starts at around $3 million. Some versions cost considerably more. Only 500 Chirons were ever made. Each one is assembled by hand at the Bugatti factory in Molsheim, France. A team of skilled engineers spends months constructing a single vehicle. Every component is checked, measured, and tested to extreme tolerances. At its heart sits an 8.0-liter quad-turbocharged W16 engine. 16 cylinders. 4 turbochargers. Over 1,500 horsepower in the most powerful versions. It can accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 2.5 seconds. Its top speed exceeds 300 miles per hour. These are not ordinary machines. They are rolling works of art. But even the most extraordinary machines can be broken. In the early 2020s, a Bugatti Chiron was involved in a serious crash. The car suffered catastrophic damage. The insurance company assessed the wreck. The verdict was swift. The Chiron was written off. In the automotive world, a written-off car is effectively declared dead. Insurance companies calculate the cost of repair against the value of the vehicle. When repair costs exceed a certain threshold, often around 50 to 70% of the car's value, the car is totaled. The insurer takes ownership. The wreck is then sold, usually through a salvage auction. For most cars, a salvage title means the end. The vehicle gets parted out. What remains gets crushed. But this was no ordinary car. And the man who bought it was no ordinary mechanic. Matt Armstrong is a British automotive content creator based in the United Kingdom. He built his career on YouTube by purchasing damaged, salvaged, and written-off vehicles and rebuilding them. His channel had grown to over 3 million subscribers by the time this story began. Every rebuild was documented in detail, from the first inspection of a wreck to the moment he drove it back onto public roads. Armstrong had rebuilt many impressive machines before. High-end sports cars, luxury SUVs, performance vehicles of all kinds. But when the wrecked Bugatti Chiron came up for sale, something shifted. This was different. The purchase price has never been fully confirmed publicly. According to various reports, Armstrong acquired the wreck for somewhere between £150,000 and £200,000. A fraction of what the car was worth in perfect condition. To some, it seemed like an extraordinary bargain. To others, it looked like a trap. When Armstrong posted his first video announcing the project, the response was immediate. Hundreds of thousands of views arrived within hours. Comments flooded in from around the world. Some viewers were excited. Others were skeptical. Many simply could not believe that anyone would attempt such a rebuild outside of a factory environment. The condition of the car when it arrived at his workshop was severe. Structural damage throughout the body. Panels destroyed. Mechanical systems compromised. Even assessing the full extent of the damage took weeks. But Armstrong did not stop. He got to work. What viewers watching from their screens could not yet see was a darker layer forming beneath the excitement. Bugatti is not the kind of company that watches its cars disappear into private workshops without comment. The brand is fiercely protective of its reputation, its engineering, and its image in the world. A Chiron being publicly dismantled and rebuilt on YouTube, without factory support, without official oversight, without authorization, was not something a company like Bugatti would simply ignore. The dream had begun, but so had the conflict. Matt had no idea that the moment he posted that first video, Bugatti was already watching. It did not take long for Bugatti to make its position known. Shortly after Matt Armstrong began documenting his rebuild project publicly, Bugatti made clear through communications and public statements that it would not support the project in any form. It would not provide technical assistance. It would not supply parts through official channels. And it would not certify the vehicle once the rebuild was complete. The message was measured but firm. And at the center of it was a single word: safety. A Bugatti Chiron is not simply a collection of parts bolted together. It is a deeply integrated system. The chassis, the engine, the aerodynamics, the braking systems, the electronics, every element is engineered to function together within extremely precise tolerances. The car is built to perform at speeds that almost no other vehicle on Earth can match. At those speeds, even small deviations from factory specifications can have catastrophic consequences. Bugatti's argument was straightforward. A privately rebuilt Chiron, assembled outside the factory, without factory tools, factory data, or factory expertise, could not be guaranteed to meet the same standards as a car that left Molsheim in certified condition. According to their position, allowing such a vehicle onto public roads would be irresponsible. On the surface, it was a safety argument, but many observers noted something else beneath it. The hypercar world has long maintained strict control over how its vehicles exist beyond the showroom. Ferrari is perhaps the most well-known example. For decades, Ferrari has included clauses in its sales agreements that restrict what owners can do with their cars. Selling certain models without Ferrari's approval, modifying them without authorization, or racing them in unsanctioned events has led to Ferrari blacklisting buyers entirely, meaning they can never purchase a new Ferrari again. Lamborghini and other elite manufacturers have taken similar stances over the years. The argument is always the same. These are not ordinary products. They carry the manufacturer's name. What happens to them after the sale still reflects on the brand. Bugatti's response to Armstrong's project fit neatly into this long tradition of manufacturer control. But what was different here was the audience. Armstrong's YouTube channel meant that millions of people were watching in real time. This was not a quiet legal dispute handled behind closed doors. Every development was filmed. Every setback was shared. Every statement from Bugatti reached a global audience of car enthusiasts, mechanics, and ordinary viewers who had never owned a luxury car but were fascinated by the story. The reaction online was enormous and deeply divided. Many viewers framed the story as a classic David versus Goliath battle. A self-taught mechanic from the UK going up against one of the wealthiest and most exclusive car manufacturers on the planet. They pointed out that Armstrong had legally purchased the vehicle. It was his property. What right did Bugatti have to interfere with what he chose to do with it? Others sided with Bugatti. A car capable of 300 miles per hour is not a toy, they argued. The safety concerns were real. A rebuilt Chiron that failed at high speed would be catastrophic, not just for the driver, but potentially for anyone nearby. The story spread beyond YouTube. Automotive journalists picked it up. Industry publications covered it. Television segments discussed it. What had started as one man's passion project had become a genuine public debate about ownership, safety, and the rights of manufacturers over products they had already sold. Bugatti had spoken once. Clearly. Firmly. But the story was far from over. But Bugatti's first refusal was only the beginning, and the second one would carry far more weight. Despite everything, Matt Armstrong did not stop. He had heard Bugatti's position. He understood the obstacles ahead. But he had made a commitment to his audience, to the project, and to himself. The rebuild would continue. What followed was one of the most technically demanding automotive projects ever documented publicly on the internet. The Bugatti Chiron is not a car that can be fixed in an ordinary garage. Its 8.0-liter W16 engine alone is one of the most complex power plants ever fitted to a road car. The W16 configuration means 16 cylinders arranged in a unique double V layout. 4 turbochargers sit within the engine bay, each one feeding compressed air into the combustion system. The engine management electronics alone require specialist diagnostic equipment that most workshops simply do not own. The chassis is constructed from carbon fiber, not the decorative carbon fiber used on trim panels in lesser cars, but structural carbon fiber monocoque construction. It is extraordinarily strong and extraordinarily difficult to repair. Carbon fiber cannot simply be welded like steel. Damaged sections require precision inspection, specialist repair techniques, and in many cases, complete replacement. Then there were the aerodynamic systems. The Chiron uses active aerodynamics, wing elements, and air channels that adjust automatically at different speeds to keep the car planted and stable. These systems are electronically controlled and deeply integrated into the vehicle's computers. Every single one of these systems had to be addressed in Armstrong's rebuild. Sourcing parts was a major challenge from the beginning. Bugatti components are not available at an ordinary parts supplier. Many components are made exclusively by Bugatti or by a small number of specialist suppliers under strict agreements. Without factory cooperation, Armstrong had to find parts through other channels, salvage yards, private sellers, specialist intermediaries, and in some cases, custom fabrication. Finding engineers willing to work on the project was equally difficult. Some specialists were hesitant to get involved, aware of Bugatti's position and concerned about their own relationships with the manufacturer. Others were drawn in by the sheer technical challenge. Working on a Chiron, even a damaged one, is an experience that most automotive engineers will never have. The financial cost was extraordinary. Estimates based on Armstrong's own documentation suggest the rebuild consumed hundreds of thousands of pounds. Parts alone accounted for a significant portion of that. Labor, specialist equipment, and testing added more. Armstrong's YouTube channel became something more than just a documentary platform during this period. It became the financial engine that kept the project alive. Each video attracted millions of views. Advertising revenue, sponsorships, and viewer support helped fund the next stage of the rebuild. Without the channel, the project would likely have been impossible. But the money and the technical challenges, as great as they were not the hardest part. The hardest part was the uncertainty. As the rebuild progressed, Armstrong and those around him began to understand something that had not been fully clear at the start. Finishing the car mechanically was one challenge. Getting it legally registered and approved to drive on public roads was an entirely different fight, one that no amount of technical skill could win alone. In the United Kingdom, a vehicle that has been written off and subsequently rebuilt must go through a specific inspection process before it can be registered again. For standard road cars, this process is demanding but manageable. But a Bugatti Chiron is not a standard road car. Its speed, its power, and its complexity placed it in a different category entirely. And without any cooperation from Bugatti, no technical data, no certification support, no acknowledgement of the rebuild, the path forward was murky at best. Armstrong kept filming. He kept rebuilding. Piece by piece, the Chiron began to look like a car again. But beneath the determination, a difficult truth was taking shape. Completing the rebuild was not the finish line. It was just the beginning of a different race entirely. The car was almost finished. But without Bugatti's approval, it might never see a single public road. When the second refusal came, it was different from the first. The first time, Bugatti had made its position clear through public statements and indirect communication. It was firm, but it was also somewhat open to interpretation. Some hoped that if Armstrong completed the rebuild to a high enough standard, Bugatti might eventually soften its stance. The second refusal removed that hope. According to reports, Bugatti communicated more formally this time, making clear that it would not provide the technical documentation, certification support, or engineering sign-off necessary for the vehicle to proceed through official roadworthiness approval. This was not a preference. It was a position backed by the company's legal and technical teams. To understand why this mattered so deeply, it is important to understand how vehicle certification works in the United Kingdom and the European Union. Every car sold legally in Europe and the UK must meet what is known as type approval standards. Type approval is the process by which a vehicle design is tested, inspected, and certified as meeting all relevant safety, emissions, and engineering requirements. When a manufacturer sells you a new car, that car already carries its type approval. It has been certified as safe and legal to drive. When a car is written off and subsequently rebuilt, the situation changes. The vehicle's original type approval no longer automatically applies. The rebuilt car must go through its own roadworthiness assessment before it can be legally registered and driven. For an ordinary car, this process involves inspection by an approved testing authority. The car is checked against defined standards. If it passes, it receives approval. If it fails, the owner is told what needs to change. But the Bugatti Chiron is not an ordinary car. Its engineering is so complex, and its performance envelope so extreme, that standard inspection processes are not designed to evaluate it. The testing bodies that certify ordinary road cars do not have the tools, the expertise, or the legal framework to assess whether a rebuilt Chiron is safe at the speeds it is capable of reaching. In cases like this, the original manufacturer's cooperation is not just helpful. In practice, it is essential. Manufacturers hold the engineering data. They know the tolerances. They know what a correctly built example looks like. Without that data, independent inspection becomes guesswork. Bugatti knew this, and their refusal to cooperate was, in effect, a refusal to allow the car to ever be legally driven. The legal question underneath all of this was stark. Could a manufacturer effectively block a privately owned vehicle from being used, not by taking direct legal action, but simply by withholding the technical cooperation that the certification system required? Legal experts who commented on the case noted that existing law had not clearly answered this question. Consumer protection laws in the UK and EU protect buyers from defective products. They protect the right to repair in certain contexts. But the specific scenario of a salvage rebuild hypercar being denied manufacturer cooperation for certification sat in a gray area that the law had never explicitly addressed. Armstrong had done everything a reasonable person could do. He had purchased the car legally. He had invested enormous resources into the rebuild. He had worked with specialist engineers to restore it to a high standard. But the rules of the system as they stood gave him no clear path forward. Frustration was visible. Disbelief was understandable. He had climbed the mountain, and at the top he found a locked door. Then something unexpected happened. Regulators in Brussels started asking questions that Bugatti had not prepared for. The story of Matt Armstrong and his Bugatti Chiron had always been bigger than one man and one car. But it took the attention of European regulators to make that reality fully visible to the world. The European Union has been engaged in a long and complicated debate about the right to repair for years. This debate is not just about cars. It covers electronics, appliances, medical devices, and industrial equipment. At its core, the question is simple. When you buy something, do you truly own it? Or does the manufacturer retain a kind of invisible control through software, through certification rules, through the withholding of technical information that limits what you can do with your own property? The automotive industry sits at one of the most contested points in this debate. Modern cars are not just mechanical machines. They are computers on wheels. A current Bugatti Chiron contains millions of lines of software code. Its systems communicate with each other constantly. Its performance is managed by electronic control units that the owner cannot access, cannot reprogram, and in many cases cannot even fully diagnose without manufacturer-provided tools. As vehicles have become more software-dependent, manufacturers have gained increasing leverage over what owners and independent repairers can do. Authorized service centers hold the diagnostic equipment. Manufacturers control the software update pipelines. Technical documentation is kept proprietary. And as Armstrong's case demonstrated vividly, certification cooperation can be withheld entirely. The EU's Right to Repair framework, which was strengthened through new regulations passed in 2024, addressed some of these issues. It required manufacturers to make spare parts and repair information available for a wider range of products. It aimed to extend the lifespan of goods and reduce the leverage that companies held over independent repairers. But the regulations had significant gaps. They focused primarily on consumer electronics and standard household appliances. Complex, high-performance vehicles, particularly those in limited production luxury categories, existed in a regulatory space that the new rules did not fully reach. Armstrong's case landed precisely in one of those gaps. Right to repair advocates across Europe recognized immediately what his situation represented. Here was a concrete, public, well-documented example of a manufacturer using its technical position to prevent a private owner from using a vehicle he had legally purchased and painstakingly restored. It was not theoretical. It was happening in real time, on YouTube, in front of millions of viewers. Legal commentators began writing about the case. Consumer rights organizations cited it in submissions to regulatory bodies. Industry observers discussed it at conferences. And within European policy circles, questions began to be raised about whether the existing regulatory framework was adequate to address situations like Armstrong's. Reports suggested that the case attracted attention from within the European Parliament itself. MEPs concerned with consumer rights and the right to repair movement reportedly took note of Armstrong's situation as an illustration of the kind of manufacturer control that existing legislation had not yet constrained. Bugatti, for its part, maintained its position. The company continued to frame its refusal as a matter of safety and engineering integrity. A rebuilt Chiron, in their view, could not be certified as equivalent to a factory-built example. Allowing it on public roads would represent an unacceptable risk. But critics pushed back on this framing. If safety was truly the concern, they argued, then the solution was not to refuse all cooperation. The solution was to engage with the inspection process, to provide technical data under controlled conditions, and to allow qualified authorities to make an independent judgment. Refusing to participate entirely, they said, was not a safety policy. It was a control policy. The distinction mattered enormously. Because if manufacturers could use safety language to justify withholding cooperation from any private owner attempting to repair or rebuild their vehicle, the implications extended far beyond hypercars. Every car owner in Europe was watching, because the question being asked about Armstrong's Chiron was really a question about all of them. The outcome of this case could set a precedent that affects every car owner in Europe, and nobody was ready for that. As of the time this story is being told, the legal situation around Matt Armstrong's Bugatti Chiron remains unresolved. The car exists. It has been rebuilt. By most visual accounts, it looks extraordinary as a testament to the skill and determination of the people who worked on it. But its legal status on public roads remains in question. The documentation required for full registration has not been secured. The path through official certification remains blocked. Bugatti's official position has not changed. The company has not agreed to provide technical support, engineering documentation, or certification cooperation. According to the latest available information, that stance holds firm. And yet the story has clearly entered a new phase. The involvement of EU regulatory attention, even at an exploratory level, changes the landscape. When policymakers begin asking questions about a specific case, industries pay attention. Legal teams are put on notice. Positions that were once simply assumed to be defensible are now being examined more carefully. But the significance of this story reaches far beyond one man, one car, and one manufacturer. The automotive industry is in the middle of a profound transformation. Electric vehicles are replacing combustion engines. Software is becoming the dominant feature of modern cars. Over-the-air updates allow manufacturers to change the behavior of a vehicle after the sale, adding features, removing features, and in some cases limiting performance based on subscription payments. In this environment, the question of who truly owns a car is not an abstract legal puzzle. It is a practical, everyday concern. John Deere, the agricultural equipment giant, faced years of legal battles with farmers who simply wanted to repair their own tractors. The farmers argued that software locks prevented them from fixing equipment they had paid for. John Deere argued that it was protecting its intellectual property and ensuring safety. Courts and regulators in the United States ultimately sided more with the right to repair movement, forcing changes to how the company managed its software restrictions. The parallels to Armstrong's situation are clear. The vehicles are different. The industry is different, but the underlying conflict is the same. If Bugatti's position were to be legally upheld, if manufacturers were confirmed to have the right to withhold certification cooperation and effectively keep privately owned vehicles off the road, the implications for every car owner would be significant. A manufacturer could, in theory, define any rebuilt or independently repaired vehicle as uncertifiable. The practical effect would be to eliminate the private repair and restoration market for any sufficiently complex vehicle. If, on the other hand, Armstrong's situation were to result in legal or regulatory change, if new rules were established requiring manufacturers to cooperate with independent certification processes under defined conditions, it would represent a fundamental shift in the balance of power between manufacturers and consumers. Neither outcome is certain. Both are possible. What is certain is that the rebuilt Chiron, sitting in a workshop somewhere in the UK, fully restored and visually magnificent, has become a symbol of a larger conflict that will define how we think about ownership, technology, and consumer rights for years to come. Matt Armstrong set out to rebuild a car. He ended up at the center of a legal and political debate that stretches from private workshops to the corridors of power in Brussels. The road ahead is unclear, but the question his project raised is now impossible to ignore. The car sits finished. The battle is not. And the next move belongs to the law. This story is still unfolding. New developments could come from the courts, from regulators, or from Bugatti itself. What began as a YouTube rebuild series has grown into something that legal experts, policymakers, and automotive historians will be discussing for years. One man, one wrecked car, and a question that now belongs to all of us.